The Miami Heat have managed to steal a game on Denver's home floor, something I very much did not expect. And when I tweeted such sentiment, I got a bunch of replies along the lines of, well, yeah, that's just kind of the deal with the Heat. With the Heat, it seems, there's every reason in the world to doubt them, and then suddenly with their backs against the wall, they prove you wrong. And in seeing this reply a few times, something clicked with me that made me finally really understand why the Heat are so successful. There is one simple facet of the Miami Heat culture that allows them to far outperform the talent and thus expectations they would normally have, and that feature is perseverance. The NBA Finals are here, which makes now the perfect time to check out this video's sponsor, Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest way to play daily fantasy for someone that is new to daily fantasy. It is just you versus the projections. Select 2 to 6 players and pick whether you think they will get more or less of the projected stat. Get them all right and you can win up to 25 times your money. Prize Picks is also doing a massive giveaway for this postseason. Every day during the playoffs, one random Prize Picks user will have a chance to become a millionaire. One entry placed after 8 a.m. Eastern will be randomly selected every day to make a 6-pick flex play. Get 4 picks correct and you win $16,000. Get 5 correct, you win $80,000. And get all 6 correct and you will walk away a millionaire. And what's great for you is that if you have not downloaded Prize Picks already, first-time users who use my code RUSTY will get an instant deposit match up to $100. So let's say you put $50 in, Prize Picks gives you $50 and so on. So click the link in the description to download Prize Picks, and again, use my code RUSTY for an instant deposit match up to $100. Thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring this video. The Miami Heat have had their backs against the wall multiple times in this postseason. Even if they didn't necessarily face a deficit in the actual series they were in the case of the Bucks and Boston series, the opposition was heavily favored. When the odds are stacked against the Heat, it seems that's when they play their best basketball. That's also why I think they easily played their weakest basketball of the entire postseason in the second round versus the New York Knicks. After Miami beat Milwaukee, I think it was safe to say that they were pretty heavily favored in this one. And because of that, I actually saw a handful of Knicks fans act like because they pushed Miami to 6, it's like a real big deal and like they really bothered them. And frankly, I think that is just really silly. I'm not trying to be rude here, but it seemed very clear to me by the way that Miami played New York that they didn't take them particularly seriously. Most people favored Miami in that series, and thus they shot poorly and let a few games slip. It's also worthy of mention that Jimmy didn't even play in one of those losses, but regardless, we saw Miami do some backsliding in that series. They didn't have the excellence that they had in the Milwaukee series, nor the excellence they would have for a large majority of the Boston series following it. Now, in this Boston series, at the start of the series, they obviously had their backs against the wall to some extent because most people picked Boston to win that series. But of course, after going up 3-0, Miami didn't have their backs against the wall. They were heavily favored to win the series from there because still, to this point, no team has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit. But I don't think that disproves my point. If anything, I feel like it proves it further because them then allowing this series to go to 7 was because, again, they weren't really playing with their backs against the wall, and they kind of started to backslide just like they did in that Knicks series, but of course, the Celtics are significantly better than the Knicks, so the consequences of that backsliding was far more significant. After going up 3-0, they let it get to 7, and now in Game 7, with their backs against the wall, facing potentially the most embarrassing loss in NBA history, they play their second best game of the whole series, one of their best of the entire postseason, winning by 19 points and having control of the game pretty much the whole way through. Then we get to the Denver series, where Denver is obviously heavily favored. I myself said this series is more likely to go to 4 than it is to go to 7. And then, after that, They managed to win a game on Denver's home floor, which I am pretty sure to this point Denver hasn't lost a single home game in the postseason. But game one from Denver, on top of them being favored, they smacked Miami. And they did it while not even shooting amazing from outside, which is a big staple in their success, just like it is for any modern NBA team. So it looked like this series was going to just be a beatdown after game one, but Miami, with their backs against the wall, fight back and play their best basketball. Now, this has some downsides, most obviously letting that Boston series go to 7 in the first place, allowing the Knicks series to go longer than it probably should have, but at large, this is a net positive. Being able to come back from a bad drop is an admirable thing. You know, like, why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves back up. You know, it would be good if you just didn't fall in the first place. Maybe your parents would still be alive. But either way, you get the point. I don't know how many of you actually got that reference. I don't even know what I'm talking about. So let's get back to the point. But it's clear with Miami's culture that perseverance, whether it's something that is specifically preached by Erik Spoelstra or just simply something that naturally came from the mental toughness they've developed, one way or the other, perseverance is a staple of their success. And not only do you see this in terms of how each game goes, but you see it within the game itself. In last night's game versus Denver, they were up 8 going into the fourth quarter, and they gave Miami, again, every excuse to lose. And then, out of the blue, in the fourth quarter, Duncan Robinson basically single-handedly brings them back. And they overall close the fourth quarter, scoring 36 points to Denver's 25. Momentum is a huge part of this sport. I think far more than any other sport, given my limited knowledge of any other sport. And I think it's especially the case in the playoffs, where you can see the impact of momentum. And every single team is susceptible to the impacts of momentum, and Miami is no different. But to me, it feels like Miami is easily the least vulnerable to it. Even if they do slip up a bit, they're pretty much always going to bounce back in the game itself. The Heat don't really ever go away. You're not going to see this team choose to just roll over and die. There are many reasons Miami has found success, and it would almost be like a form of mysticism to act like perseverance is the only factor, because it sure as hell isn't. But it's very clear that Erik Spoelstra and Miami's culture at large has cultivated a culture where players just don't give up. They can stare at a large deficit, they can go into a series everyone expects them to lose, and they just block it all out. They do not care. They're gonna play their best in these circumstances. And that is something that is immensely valuable and something that transcends talent. Talent is something that Miami has not really had the edge in for any of these series except for maybe the Knicks series, but even then I think from a talent perspective the Knicks are somewhat evenly matched. But the difference for Miami is they have obviously the tactical effect that they have with Erik Spoelstra's ridiculous X's and O's knowledge, but also, of course, this culture that allows them to have the mental edge. And the sport's about a lot of things and not just talent. So because the Heat don't necessarily have all the talent in the world, they've cultivated an environment where they exceed at everything that's not that. When you're playing at a talent deficit, you need the tactical edge that you're getting with Spo, and you need a mental edge, which, I mean, it's also a lot to do with Spo. I think the point of this video is Erik Spoelstra is the greatest coach. And, you know, not the greatest, but like definitely the best in my generation of NBA fans, for sure. And I do think he's probably a top 5 coach of all time at this point. Maybe that's a crazy take, but I don't know, man. I've never seen any other coach have this kind of dramatic effect in my personal experience as an NBA fan since Greg Popovich. So it's a pretty good name to be compared to. But yeah, I guess I got my point across. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and that is it. Goodbye.